Circling back to one of our top stories, a Chinese minister has reportedly met with more than 1,000 alleged scam workers at the border between Thailand and Myanmar, as officials from the three countries pledged to work together to crack down on scam syndicates. And for more, Jason Tao from the United States Institute of Peace joins us from Bangkok with more. Mr. Tao, could you tell us how people end up at these scam centers? And people may think to themselves that they would never be a victim, but how easy is it to get caught up in these operations?
Yeah, the trafficking networks that are targeting individuals to bring into the scam syndicates have gotten more and more sophisticated in terms of how they're going about this. You saw that over the past couple of years, the most common way of doing it was a job advertisement on social media, which might link to a website about what appears to be a legitimate company in Southeast Asia. And you would then have kind of a process of applying for a job. The recruiter would eventually, if you're offered the job, arrange for airfare, arrange for airport pickup, and then individuals upon arrival in a transit country would get trafficked across the border into Myanmar, that often being arrival in Bangkok. Now, you've seen over the past year in particular that the modality of trafficking has become more and more sophisticated. Now you're starting to see a lot of very customized and targeted approaches to individuals, often maybe even people who are not openly seeking jobs, but you'll see where, for example, around this recent case of an actor that was trafficked into Myanmar through Thailand, where criminal actors had actually used someone who had worked in the film industry in China for more than 7 years, went through that person's social network and identified an individual who thought he was actually going off to Thailand to try out for a part in a movie. You can sort of see how the trafficking is becoming more and more sophisticated in terms of the outreach through this case.
Now, there are all sorts of scams going on here: false romantic ploys, bogus investment pitches, and illegal gambling schemes. Can you provide some numbers as to how much money is stolen from victims?
Yeah, so last year, USIP, we had a senior study group that looked at this as a phenomenon globally. And according to our research, the scam centers based in Southeast Asia that are perpetrating these scams, which seek to really clean out victims entirely of all of their worldly possessions by establishing psychological control over a victim. Sometimes they're romance scams, sometimes they involve building trust with victims in other forms of ways. That they're stealing in the range of $65 billion per year from a global population. That's just, kind of from these scam syndicates that are operating in these compounds in Southeast Asia, with Myanmar being one of the three countries that are a major hub for this form of activity.
Now, in all of these operations, who gets the money eventually?
I mean, the majority of the funds, the vast majority of the funds are going to the scam syndicate kingpins, right? So, there are organized crime groups that have established these compounds where you'll then have smaller players, individual syndicates will rent out space inside, and some share of the cut goes to those, compound owners. They're kind of at the top of this pyramid. Of course, then payments will also go to the actors that are providing security to the compounds. And in the case of Myanmar, this is going directly to the border guard force of the Myanmar military, the Karen border guard force in that particular case. Some of the funds then trickle down to money laundering syndicates. Some of the funds will go to cover the costs of security for the compounds, because at the end of the day, they need to keep the rank and file of the scammers, many of whom are there unwillingly, kind of held inside of these compounds. And then, of course, some people who are actually on the phones, who are making these phone calls, or who are, going on social media and targeting victims, they're also getting some form of payment. But the vast majority of the funds are sticking with the organized crime groups and with the groups like the Myanmar Military Border Guard Force that are providing the security umbrella for them.
Well, as reported, this is a multinational operation involving Thailand, China, and Myanmar. There is a diplomatic element to this. Thai police are working with the militia of the Karen minority. Is Bangkok here seeing the militia as the right people to involved in the security operation?
That's not really clear at this point. I mean, on one hand, you see where Thai police are reported to also be looking at an arrest warrant on some of the individuals involved in that militia group. It's also very clear that that militia group, going back to 2016, was the one that systematically brought all of these figures within the organized crime world into the Myanmar-Thailand borderlands. So you saw from the end of 2016 all the way up until 2020, where one organized crime group after another was brought into that area adjacent to Thailand's province of Tak, adjacent to Mesat. So the Border Guard Force has really been involved throughout this over the past 8, 9 years in bringing all of these criminal groups into the area. And all of these groups are operating with the full awareness of that Border Guard Force. So that Border Guard Force is directly providing security. It's directly helping to facilitate, for example, the availability of electricity, of internet, of other resources to the scam compounds. This has really become, its core business, its core source of revenue. And so this whole area under its control has really been transformed into a scam economy. If you were to fully eradicate the scam centers from that particular area, that would leave really the Border Guard Force without the mainstay, without its main economic flows of resources. So it's really not clear at this point. I mean, I think that the move by Thai police to initiate a process of requesting an arrest warrant has had some certain impacts on the other side of the border. You now see that the Border Guard Force and some of the other militia groups are at least starting to allow some of these victims to come across the border. But we're yet to see signs that any of these groups have an interest in systematically eradicating the scam centers out of that area.
Well, many thanks for those insights. We've been speaking to Jason Ta of the United States Institute of Peace.